My name is Claire Moreau, and for 12 years I worked as a flight attendant for Air France. I've seen turbulence that felt like the sky was tearing open. I've handled medical emergencies at 30,000 feet. I've even dealt with passengers who swore they saw things through the windows at night. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what happened on Flight 328, Paris to Montreal. Most people don't believe me when I tell them this, but I know what I saw, and I know what followed me home. It started like any other red-eye flight. The airport lights reflected on the wet tarmac, and the air smelled like cold metal and jet fuel. The passengers boarded slowly, tired, yawning, wrapped in scarves and winter jackets. I remember checking seat 14A, because the man sitting there refused to look at me. He kept his face turned toward the window, hood up, hands folded on his lap. I smiled politely. "Bonsoir, monsieur, let me know if you need anything." He didn't respond. Not even a nod. He just stared at his reflection in the glass, like he wasn't fully there. At the time, I thought, great, another quiet, unfriendly passenger. If only that had been the case. The cabin lights dimmed. Passengers settled into their seats. The engines roared beneath us, vibrating through the floor. During takeoff, I walked the aisle for final checks. As we lifted into the clouds, I glanced again at 14A. The seat was empty. But I knew. I had seen someone sitting there during boarding. I scanned the row. 14B and 14C were occupied. An older couple reading magazines. I whispered, "Excuse me, was someone sitting here earlier?" They looked confused. "No," the woman said. "It's been empty the whole time." I forced a smile, but something cold settled in my stomach. I decided maybe I was just tired. It was a night flight, after all. So I went back to the galley. But then, the call button for 14A lit up. An empty seat had just requested assistance. And I hadn't even reached cruising altitude yet. I walked toward the row again, trying not to look nervous. The passengers beside the seat were asleep now. The aisle was quiet. I stood over the empty seat. The call button was still glowing. "Is someone here?" I whispered like an idiot, immediately regretting it. And then, a breath, a soft exhale, right next to my ear. I spun around so fast I almost hit my elbow on the overhead bin. No one was there. But the air had changed. It felt colder, heavier, and a faint scent of wet earth, like soil after rain, lingered around the seat. I pressed the call button to reset it. It turned off. As I walked away, the light flicked back on. Ding. Again. And again. And again. I didn't go back that time. About an hour into the flight, turbulence hit. Nothing serious at first. But while securing the overhead compartments, I saw something that froze my heart. A man walked past row 17. Tall, thin, wearing an old Air France flight jacket. The kind they stopped issuing decades ago. He walked calmly, hands behind his back, heading toward the rear of the plane. But I knew every crew member on board. I knew every face, every uniform, every shift schedule. This man wasn't one of us. "Sir, excuse me, sir," I called. He didn't turn around. He didn't slow. He just kept walking until he reached the back door of the aircraft. And then he vanished. Not like he hid. Not like he dipped into the lavatory. He faded, like smoke dissolving into the air. I stood frozen, my throat tight. Then a passenger whispered behind me, "You saw him too, didn't you?" I turned. It was a young girl, maybe 10 years old, hugging a stuffed rabbit. "He keeps walking up and down," she said. "He doesn't blink." I couldn't lie to her. "Yes, I saw him." She pointed to 14A. "Is he the same man who sits there sometimes?" My blood ran cold. In the galley, I told the other flight attendant, Marion, what I saw. Her face drained of color. She whispered, "Claire, they never told you?" "Told me what?" She looked around before speaking. Flight 328. 10 years ago there was an accident. A crew member died during descent, heart attack. He collapsed in the rear galley. They think he tried to reach the jump seat but didn't make it. My heart hammered. And his uniform? I asked. Marion nodded. That old style, that was what they wore back then. My hands started shaking. I realized we were not flying alone. Around 3 a.m., most passengers slept. Cabin dark. Only the emergency lights glowed softly. I walked quietly down the aisle to check on the older couple in row 14. As I passed seat 14A, something grabbed my wrist. Cold fingers. Thin. Like ice-covered bones. I gasped and looked down. A hand was protruding from the empty seat. Just a hand. Pale, bluish, veins dark like ink. Gripping me tightly. Then the rest of him materialized, slowly, seatbelt cutting through his body as if he didn't belong in this world. His face was gray. His eyes hollow and blackened at the edges. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but only a gurgling sound came out. I yanked my arm away and stumbled backwards. He reached toward me. Not aggressively, but desperately. Like he needed help. And then, he disappeared. Not fading this time. He vanished brutally, like a switch had been flipped. I ran to the galley, hyperventilating. Marion grabbed my shoulders. Claire, what happened? What did you see? Before I could speak, all the cabin call buttons lit up at once. Hundreds of them. Rows after rows. A glowing wave of blue lights reflecting off the windows. Passengers woke up confused, looking around. And then the PA system crackled. Not the captain's voice. Not the first officer's. A whisper. A man's whisper, raspy and broken. Descending too fast, stop stop. The lights flickered. The plane jolted. Marion's eyes widened. Claire, that's what he said before he died. During the incident 10 years ago. My skin crawled. The ghost wasn't trying to hurt us. He was warning us. I sprinted to the cockpit. I banged on the door. Claire, what's wrong? The captain asked through the interphone. Captain, something's wrong with the plane. I heard rapid clicking. Switches. Alarm tones. We're experiencing an autopilot malfunction, he said. We're descending too early. We're trying to correct it. My blood turned to ice. The ghost's whisper echoed in my mind. Descending too fast. What do you need? I shouted. Tell the cabin to remain seated. Do not let anyone stand. I turned to run back. And there, in the narrow corridor outside the cockpit, stood the ghost. Blocking my way. His face inches from mine. His lips barely moved as he whispered. Brace, brace. The plane lurched violently. The oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Passengers screamed. I collapsed to the floor as the aircraft shook like a dying metal beast. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the descent stabilized. The alarms quieted. The turbulence faded. The plane leveled. The captain managed to manually override the system. We continued the flight without further issues. Hours later, when the wheels finally touched the runway in Montreal, passengers applauded. Some cried. Some hugged strangers. But none of them knew what really saved us. As passengers disembarked, the little girl with the stuffed rabbit stopped beside me. He's gone now, she whispered. He just wanted to finish his last flight. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because she was right. After everyone left, I walked down the empty aisle one last time. The cabin was quiet. Cold. Too cold. I reached row 14. Seat 14A's seatbelt was buckled. I didn't remember doing that. There was a folded piece of paper on the cushion. I picked it up. It wasn't written in pen. It looked burned into the paper. A single word. Merci. Thank you. The next day, when I checked the crew manifest from the incident 10 years earlier, I found a name. The dead flight attendant. Seat assignment when they were transporting him home. 14A. I never worked another night flight again. But sometimes, when I fly as a passenger, I still hear it. A soft voice behind me. A breath on my ear. A whisper. Brace, brace.